Here's your latest York County forecast for Shapley, Waterboro, and Berwick. Today, expect mostly sunny skies with a hot afternoon high near 90. Tonight, clear to partly cloudy with a comfortable low around 61. Tomorrow brings increasing clouds throughout the day, but stays warm with a high near 87. Then on Tuesday, look for a mix of sun and clouds with a slightly cooler high around 86. That's your latest York County forecast. I'm Lila Sprague for 104.3 The GOAT, York County's
Seacoast Oldies
on 104.3 FM, WWSF Sanford,
and SeacoastOldies.com.
Seacoast Oldies.
The following is a paid program. The opinions expressed are of the hosts and guests and not necessarily those of WWSF, its parent company, Port Broadcasting, LLC, or the sponsors of this station.
It's time for the Real Estate Buzz with Peggy Hill. Buying, selling, or just thinking about it, you're going to want to hear what Peggy has to say. Now, here's the Real Estate Buzz with Peggy Hill on 104.3 The GOAT.
Good morning. Thank you for joining me this morning on the Real Estate Buzz with Peggy Hill. And it has been a beautiful summer. I hope everybody is out there enjoying this nice, wonderful Maine summer. And here we are on a nice Sunday morning. And what am I going to do about my show today? So I was talking in the office this week with a title lady, and we were just going over things like, boy, I wish the clients knew this. Or, man, I just sat with this homeowner who didn't even have an idea what was in the deed. And I was thinking, everybody, sits there and they go to closing and then they buy their home. And do they really know what they bought? Do they really know this? So I thought today on my show, I would do a show on things to think about if you are a homeowner. So if you're listening to this show and you actually own your own home, these are things I would be like, aha. For example, when you bought the home, you probably had a mortgage. Maybe not, but if you did, your taxes and insurance have been escrowed. And every year, you get your insurance bill, and a lot of people just toss it aside, and your insurance goes up. And it just ticks up a little bit and keeps ticking up. And then next thing you know, you're paying hundreds of dollars more than what you need to be paying. So I would say, maybe every year or every other year, definitely open it, take a look, make sure that you're paying what you think you should be paying. It doesn't cost you anything to talk to an insurance company. There's so many different insurances. Oh my goodness, like how much, what is covered, what is not covered. Do you have full replacement value? Things like that. But it doesn't cost anything. You can give ABC Insurance Company a call. Say, listen, this is my home. This is what I have for a current policy. Do I have enough insurance? Sometimes you're not covered properly because you added a big, beautiful addition or redid the whole kitchen and the insurance company isn't aware of that. So you want to make sure you have enough insurance. What are your deductibles and what are my premiums? And is there a better policy out there that might be, less expensive? And they'll give you quotes, ask a bunch of questions, like when was your last updating, things like that. And more times than not, if you've had the insurance particular company for years, you can get a cheaper policy. And sometimes you don't even have to change insurance companies, So I think at least every 1 to 2 years, if you have a home, you should take your insurance policy out and see what you're paying, what you're covered for, and then just make sure it's the right policy for you in that home. Another thing I ask questions about, so a client will call, friend, client, coworker, and say, I have a problem. There's something wrong with the deed, or somebody says this or that. And my first question is, when you bought it, did you buy title insurance? And most of them don't even know. I think I did. So we'll go dig deep and find if they did or did not. So that's a question. Do you have title insurance? I think it's very, very important to have. And I'll back up a little bit to what is title insurance. Well, title insurance is a one-time fee that you pay at closing, usually at closing, and it covers the title of any defects, any problems. They do a title search, make sure they don't see any issues, and they're like, yes, we will cover this particular property. So if anytime when you own the property, an issue comes up with the title, it's already covered under this insurance, and of course you can put a claim in and they fight it on your behalf. I think it's extraordinarily important. I have seen so many ups and downs and problems with titles, and not just old titles. Sometimes it's the person last year and they got the wrong name or the wrong description, Or maybe they, instead of putting the property line goes south, they put the property line goes west, and now you don't have a proper description. There's so many things. The brother of the sister comes and claims that she was in the will and didn't, get the property, and you don't own it. That's a title problem. There's an easement going right through the middle of your property. Oh no, did you know about that? So I think take a look. If you don't have title insurance, I would call an attorney and ask about it. And if you do, just make sure you know what you have. I think it's important. And then I'm just going to segue right into my most favorite subject. Well, besides real estate. So the deed. The deed. I have been doing this since 2003. I have done, I think we just did 800. And I can say I don't see a lot of clients, buyers, sellers, even brokers reading the deed. Literally read it. Like, what are you buying? So basically in the state of Maine, you buy a book and page of a deed. You buy the description and everything that is inside the deed. All of the encumbrances, covenants, right-of-ways, easements, you name it, it's in the deed. You now own it. And you have to live under those rules and restrictions. So reading that deed at closing before buying a home, or if you have not actually sat down and read your deed, I would pull it on out and sit down and read it just to make sure you know what's inside that deed, right? Maybe I've seen, I'll give you a few examples in a minute, but I wanted to continue on with not just the deed. So if you read, if you don't have your deed, you can go to the York County Registry of Deeds right online very easily. Click in there, put your name, put the town, and it'll pull up your deed and everything else that's in there as well under your name. So read that. But if you're looking at the deed and it says Mr. and Mrs. Smith bought 123 Main Street as described in this book and page. So it references another book and page. Pull that deed and the one before that until you get to the original deed, because things get put in subdeeds. So maybe you bought 123 Main Street, but it's referencing book 1, page 2. And when you read that deed, you have a restriction. And maybe it says you can't cut your trees and you want to cut your trees. That can be in a deed, or it says you can't have an in-home business, or you can't put up a sign, or you can't have chickens, or you have given the neighbor an easement, or they have an easement. So knowing what you own and knowing everything in that deed, I think is very important. So if you're listening, I would say go to the registry or go to your files, pull out your deeds, just take a look. I have some really great examples. I would say, so up north, this is up in Carmel, and they're going to sell. Great, that's fine. And when they did, they found out there's an easement literally going right through the middle of their house. True story. And this was just last year, like right through the middle. So the subdivision behind him had the right to go through his property, and they had built the home right over the easement. And that was an entanglement. That was a big entanglement. But he had no idea. Lived there for years and years and had no idea until it was found on the deed when they were going to closing. So I think it's important, whether you own a home, selling a home, absolutely, definitively read your deed when you are buying. So, it's the first thing I tell my clients. Here's the deed. Take a look at it. And then when you are purchasing a home, not only do you want to read it as you're doing your due diligence, making sure, here's another great example. I heard about this, not happened to me. This client was buying a home that had a daycare run in it. So it had a fenced-in backyard, and it had all of this great stuff. It was perfect. So they went to go to closing, and the seller was putting in a covenant that they could not have a daycare in that home because they were moving their daycare down the street and did not want another competing business. So the problem, the buyer who was buying it wanted to run a daycare. This is a problem, right? But if you didn't read those deeds, you wouldn't have seen that covenant had been snuck in there. So reading the deed when you're buying a home, reading the past deeds, and then read it at closing. Because if you don't get to normally see it, the seller prepares the deed to give it to the buyer, and they could slip in. I've had this happen. They could have slipped in an easement for utilities, or you can't have a daycare. And you don't get to see it if you don't read the deed, and then you're stuck with it. Because once it's signed and put in the registry, it's very, very hard to remove something, unless you go back to the original declarant, and they just might not want to remove it. So that's my tidbit for the day on the ahas, is definitely take a look at your deed and knowing what you own. You're listening to the Real Estate Buzz with Peggy.